am Orlando Jones, and I just want you to know that the Moana Nui Podcast will be starting soon. Stay tuned, yo.
I'm Veronica Taylor, and from myself and Ash Ketchum, I just want to say, Moana Nui, I choose you!
So our next interview will be with Miss Jen Taylor. Who wants to be first?
Just go first.
Go ahead, sweetheart.
As far as like what they did for Sonic the Hedgehog, and they had the original voice actor for Tails, and for you as Cortana, and how did they approach you to do it for the series that's out? Haley.
Okay, you're talking about
the Halo series.
How was it different from the series versus the games playing Cortana?
Well, not necessarily. For as like original voice talent for the games and them approaching gaming voices for the series.
Okay, so I was the original voice for the games and the series.
Right.
Right. So I'm sorry, I don't know what your question is.
Yeah, I'm sorry, because the original voice actor for Master Chief was not the voice talent for Master Chief in the series.
Yeah.
But they approached you to be a part of the series.
Yeah.
So like, how did that come about?
Well, they actually came to me. They were partway through filming, and COVID shut everything down. So he's asking how did it come about that I'm playing the role in the series of Cortana? And I got a call in August of 2020 asking me if I would audition, if I was interested in auditioning. And I said, of course, I'm happy. No, I've got better things to do. It's August of 2020. I've got better things. I said, of course, I'm happy to audition. So I read 6 or 7 of the scenes via Zoom, auditioned for them, filmed it with me walking around being Cortana, and then I had a call back where it was just a Zoom meeting, and I read the scenes with them, and right after that they said, great, see you in Budapest. So it was pretty quick, yeah. And as far as how different it was via the game, versus the games, it was using the same technology that I'm very familiar with, which is performance capture, right? But I'm doing performance capture on a TV show, so there's a ton of technical stuff that I'm having to deal with that I wouldn't normally. And also, nobody else I'm working with, at least me, is doing motion capture. Everybody else is live performance. So that was strange. Those technical things were strange, and an interesting challenge to try to maintain the character within those technical aspects. That was exciting and different and challenging. Next question, Mr. Mason.
Speaking of challenges, in the later half of the video game series, Cortana, the character, was going through rampancy, and it has been alluded to that it was a creative decision because the creative director's own family was going through Alzheimer's and dementia. That must have been a huge challenge to present a form of that disease in the character for the video games. What challenges did you find when you came to portray that during the role?
So the question, did everybody hear the question? That's not something I knew, Mason. Mason is your name?
Yes.
Mason, that's not something I knew.
Oh.
I just learned that from you. If that's true, that's remarkable. My own father is going through that, so that is a really remarkable thing that I just learned from you, and shocking to me that I didn't know that. What we tried to do in that moment, and what I was directed to do, was to play as many different facets and extreme sides of one's personality, and we blended them all together. So, for example, my director for those scenes in particular, her name was Chris. She's a remarkable director, female director, yay. And she basically pushed me to explore all of these different sides. So, and you know, it's going to sound funny when I say it here, but we were doing things like, okay, this is just straight up Cortana, right? We're just going to do Cortana's voice reading this particular line. And now I want you to do baby Cortana. And now I want you to do wizard Cortana. And now I want you, I mean, we did as many different variations, sort of personalities, as you say, that we could come up with. Now, I mean, I think she was even like, now you're farmer Cortana. Like, we just did as many, and then they blended them all together to become one. So those takes, when she's starting to fracture, are actually like 20 different takes blended together. It was an emotional experience for me at the time, but now that I'm thinking back about it, and now that you tell me that, it's even more intense. So I'm going to have to process that, because I didn't know that that was actually happening.
I apologize for hating.
No, Mason, don't. No, that's interesting for me to learn. Next question. Yes,
Hey,
Alan.
my name's Alan.
Alan, hi.
Hey, so I know that you do other stuff besides voice acting. Like I know you do like stage play. So like I guess like if you don't have a favorite out of the three, like what do you enjoy out of like those crafts, like in comparison to voice acting?
What do I enjoy the different aspects of acting? Like different
like
theater, film, voice.
Yeah.
They're all so different, but in the end, we're all pretending. I mean, they're all different variations of pretend, right? So it's like I'm a little kid getting to do all of them. I don't know that I have a favorite because I love aspects of each of them. I just finished doing a play, and doing a play is such a different experience in that you're telling a whole story each night, right? Or each day, that each time you do the performance, you have a full arc that you get to play in and explore and control at a certain point, you know what I mean? And when you're doing TV, or even performance capture, you're oftentimes, more so in TV, you're doing just a fraction of a scene oftentimes. You're doing a moment over and over and over again. And so it becomes a way of like diving into a moment that you don't do in theater, right? You dive into a moment and examine it almost minutely in TV or film. Which I think it becomes a skill and an art to figure out how to blend that, how to make that an arc, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Those tiny moments, it's tiny fragments that you then learn to blend. And I'm not sure that I am very good at it yet. I mean, I'm hoping I'm learning to be better at that. That is a true skill, a true art, I think, that an actor has. Because my basis is theater. That's where I started, and continue to do, so.
Next question.
Thank you for asking.
Deidre?
Yes, hi. I was wondering, what was your favorite part about working with Val, doing the Left 4 Dead series, and voicing Zoe?
What was my favorite part about doing Valve and voicing Zoe? So I came in late for Zoe. They had cast somebody else and done the whole thing and decided they wanted to go a different way. And so I was sort of late to that process. I had auditioned and they didn't like my audition, I guess. And they came back to me and said, can you try it differently? And I said, yeah, sure. And I auditioned again and they said, great, we'll take you. And so everybody else had already finished recording. And then we came back and I got to work with everybody in the room, all three of the three other guys in it. And that was fun because we don't ever get to do that. I mean, rarely. Most of the time we're by ourselves in a booth. So the most fun was actually being in the room with the other three guys and getting to play with them in a remarkable way. That was fun. That was my best experience from that, yeah.
Mr. D'Angelo, you had a question, sir?
So you played like 3 or 4 Cortanas now. How do you go about keeping the voice familiar, but while giving it its own twist to keep everyone else familiar and connected with the character? Wow,
Yeah, so I've played different iterations of the same character. How do you keep them separate? That's a very good question. So much of it has to do with, in my experience, timeline, right? And knowing which arc I'm playing, because it's a little, some of them are a little skewed or a little different, but it's all needs to be, as you say, similar. I feel like, especially with Cortana, I've become so familiar with that character after playing her for 21 years that I feel very comfortable finding her, and it feels more like different aspects of her personality that I'm focusing on and exploring and getting to know, discovering basically. So that's become easier for me. How to keep it clear, I oftentimes go back and listen to what I did before. I truly do that. I think other actors probably do that as well. Sometimes I have to go back, because sometimes it's also been 3 years since I've worked on a project. I'm like, what were we doing? And it also depends on my director and how they push me, what they ask for. So it is a symbiotic, relationship. I'm working with a lot of other people. I don't want to take credit for this project because there's so many people working on this character that it's not just me. So it really depends on who I'm working with as well. Yeah.
Okay. I think do we have time for one more? Okay. Then Mr. Mason, you may be the last question, sir.
So focusing exactly on that point, you have been working with the voice actor of Master Chief for so long, and your partnership has gone through so highs and lows as far as the characters.
Right.
And you guys have done this for a while. It was remarked that with Halo Infinite, he added a more mature, wizened inflection with that character to reflect that. But how has the challenges been with working with such a partner, in a good way, for so long and developing these characters for 20 years?
Yeah. How has it been working with Steve Downs, who plays the Master Chief, and developing these characters over time? It's interesting. We didn't know each other. We had never met until 10 years into this process.
Wow.
After Halo 3 came out, there was a celebration at the 10-year anniversary, so it was 2011. And he likes to joke about this because I just walked right up and gave him the biggest bear hug in the world, because I felt like you are the only other person on the planet who understands the journey that I've been working on. Halo 4 is the only project that we worked on together, actually in the booth together. The motion capture had already been done, and so we came in to basically voice over these the motion capture actors' performances, to do ADR, if you will, for that. And so we got to be together in the room, and that was a remarkable experience. And I think that I personally, when I watch Halo 4, the cutscenes, I can feel that connected, energy. For 5 and for Halo Infinite, we haven't gotten to work together. I work with a man named Bruce Thomas, who does the motion capture for Chief, and then Steve comes in and works on it after that. So I think he gets to hear what I do, but I don't get to hear what he does until after the piece. So a lot of that has to do with editing. It also has to do with us knowing each other so well, because we've gotten really to know each other doing conventions together, honestly, and just hanging out, and that's how our relationship has grown. And I imagine that is reflective, because I know what Steve's gonna do. Isn't that silly? But I feel like I do, and I'm sure he feels the same way. Like, oh, Jen's okay. Because we have become so tight. But we're not working in the same room. So it's a lot of guesswork, I think, at this point. Yeah.
Thank you so much,
Yeah.
Jen, for doing interviews with you.
I think that's quite enough. You are a doctor after all. Always nice to see you, Watson.
Everybody, we're going to go ahead and kick off our interview with Steve Downs. And if you have a question for him, please raise your hand so I can make sure I know which of you will have a question. And we're going to start with you.
So, given the fact that you've been playing the Master Chief for almost over 20 years at this point, with the latest entry in the series, Halo Infinite, it's been noted by several people that the Master Chief has a more mature, wizened aspect of it. Was that a creative decision that you had at the beginning of production?
Yeah, so mature and wise, of course, it's another way for saying he's a lot older, which he is. But yes, to answer your question, I think that was a conscious decision on my part, and I think also with my director, Paul Crocker, we talked about that, and I think with the introduction of the weapon, I think it
was going out.
Okay, we good? Okay. With the introduction of the weapon and the dynamic between the chief and his AI is a little different than it was with Cortana. So because of that, it became more of a, I guess, fatherly sort of relationship, in a way. And so yes, I think to accomplish that, I sort of approached it in that way, a little wiser, a little, been through a few things, and would maybe try to impart some of that wisdom onto his new AI.
Thank you.
Next question.
Hey, my name's Alan. Nice to meet you. So, when you first voiced Master Chief, did you expect Halo to become like the face of Xbox?
Well, no, is the short answer. The long answer is that not only did I not expect it, nobody at Bungie expected it, to the point where there was no plan to do a sequel. In fact, some of the head guys at Bungie were dead set against doing sequels. They just didn't believe in them. They thought they were really one and done kind of guys. Well, Microsoft had another idea with the success of Combat Evolved, so they went right back and started working on Halo 2. But I had no idea, and to be honest with you, I had completely forgotten about it. We did the session. It took Combat Evolved took, I think, maybe 2 or 3 sessions for me, and then we, as a voice actor, you move on, you go to the next thing. And because I wasn't involved in the gaming community, I'm not a gamer myself, I was unaware of how huge this thing was becoming. Until really over a year later, and I was at a friend's house, and their kids were playing Halo, and I recognized it. Oh, yeah. I said, I think I voiced a character in that game, and the kids said, who? And I couldn't remember his name. I said, I don't remember his name, but I think he was kind of the main guy in the game. And they said, Master Chief? And I said, yeah, it was Master Chief. So 30 minutes later, there's every kid in the neighborhood is at his front door with either an Xbox or a copy of their game wanting me to sign it. And that was my aha moment that, something was happening here that I had no idea was going on.
Yes.
As far as the live action Halo series, what is your take on that film?
On the live action show, on the Paramount show? I really like it. Obviously, it's kind of a different experience for me than it would be for maybe anybody else. I think I was delighted when they decided to include Jen Taylor as Cortana. To me, there was no other. I don't know why it was even a discussion. There was no other option as far as I was concerned. She is Cortana. I think Pablo Schreiber does a great job as Chief. The storyline is obviously different. There is some connection to the original canon, and then there's a lot that has nothing to do with the storyline in the game. But it's a different medium, and so many times when video games try to be converted into a movie or a TV show, they fail. And one of the reasons they fail is because they just basically try to do the game they're 2 different mediums. So I think they made a wise decision to approach Halo, the television show, as a different entity than Halo, the game. And I look at it like, I'm a big fan of science fiction anyway. I love good science fiction. And us science fiction lovers have a heavy cross to bear because there's a lot of lousy science fiction out there. And so I watched the show with a completely open mind and said, thinking, will I be entertained by this? And I am, and I'm interested, and I can't wait to see what they do in the second season. Yep.
You say you don't really play games a lot, but do you have a weapon that you like best in Halo?
Do I have a favorite weapon? A plasma rifle. I like it, and I have one at home. And I really like it. It doesn't have real plasma. It doesn't shoot real plasma, but I kind of like the style of it, and whenever the chief has a chance to get his hands on one, and the battle rifle, of course, is great. But I think probably I'm partial to the plasma rifle when I can. Yeah.
Have you ever had a chance to dress up as Master Chief?
Never, and nor will I ever. When I first started to make appearances on behalf of Halo and Master Chief, I remember calling Marty O'Donnell. Marty was the guy who cast me as Master Chief. He wrote all the music for the Bungie games, cast all the voices, was an integral part of the development of Halo. So when somebody asked me, they wanted me to come down to I think it was a GameStop or some iteration of GameStop to it was a grand opening, and they wanted me to make an appearance. And so I called Marty and said, "Are you okay with this? Can I do it?" He said, "Yeah." He says, the only thing we ask is that you don't dress up as the character." And I said, "Not a problem." So no, I don't. I've never put on the Mjolnir, to date, and I don't foresee it happening. Although maybe some Halloween when you come to my door, who knows? Yeah.
So you've spent a number of years as a DJ or radio personality before Halo, and then you transition. Was your relationship with your wife or your partner, who's also a voice actor, did that help ease the transition, or did you plant the idea in your head, or was it just you just doing work and it just transformed on its own?
Well, I've done voiceover, well before Halo, but radio was what was my career of choice from a long time ago, and in some ways, it can be a natural progression to get into voiceover. And early in my radio career, I actually fell in love with the production part of producing commercials or shows or whatever, and I fell in love with that part of it. And as I was building these things, I was the only voice around, so I would voice them. And then I really got into voiceover, and especially my main bread and butter with voiceover was commercial work. A lot of commercial work, some narration and that kind of thing. So it was, in some ways, a natural transition. But I kept doing radio. I just retired from full-time radio work 5-6 years ago. But I'll never retire from voiceover as long as I can speak. It's just too much fun. Yeah.
So what would you say is your favorite performance as Chief throughout all the games?
There's two that immediately come to mind. Halo 4 was my favorite experience for a couple of reasons. First of all, there was some question as to whether I would be still voicing Master Chief. When Microsoft took it over from Bungie, they were going to recast both Master Chief and Cortana with different people. Fortunately, and that's why I feel so indebted when I go to these conventions, because it's those people, the people who come up and want your autograph or whatever, they were the ones that saved us. Yes. Because when they sort of beta tested Halo 4 without our voices, there was a lot of pushback, and so we ended up going back in. So I was grateful for that, but also I really loved the storyline of Halo 4, and I felt that it really started to dig a little deeper into the relationship between the Chief and Cortana. And then thirdly, it was the first time Jen Taylor and I actually got to work together in the same room at the same time, and that was a real joy. But also Halo Infinite, and Halo Infinite, as I mentioned earlier, I had a great director in Paul Crocker, and he really embraced Master Chief in a way that no other director really had. It really kind of understood him in the way that I understood him, and so we could together, bring to life. And it was really when I finally got to watch Halo Infinite, It was the first time in all the Halo games I've ever done where I thought, well, that's I left my best work on the floor. You either like it or you don't, but I was satisfied with it, and so Halo Infinite and 4 are kind of tied neck and neck, I guess. Yes.
So aside from Halo, what would you say is your proudest voiceover work?
Is my what?
Your proudest, like
yeah. Well, pretty hard to top Halo. Most of my other work, as I said, has been commercial work. I had a long-running campaign back in the, when was that? Mid-2000s with Carnival Cruise Line. That I'm proud of it because it paid really well, and it ran for a very long time. So, you know, I really like that, and I really like to do, and I don't do much of it. Hint out there, producers. I like doing documentaries. I like watching them, but I like recording them. It's funny because one of my favorite voiceover people who does documentaries is Liev Schreiber, who is the half brother of Pablo. Which is sort of this, 6 degrees of separation thing. Because I really admire his work as not only as an actor, but also as a voiceover and for narration. And I love, doing that kind of work. I did a series many years ago, back in the early 90s, for the Shark Week that's on Discovery Channel. So I worked with a guy, they were connected to Cousteau and his production company, and I did a number of narrations for some videos that they put together that would run during Shark Week. So that was kind of cool. That was my claim to fame before Halo. Hey, aren't you the guy on Shark Week? So that was pretty cool. Yeah.
What was the process of finding Master Chief's voice like? Did you just go in and just start recording, or did it take some time to develop?
Yeah. When I came in for the first sessions, Marty O'Donnell and I sat down, and there was no visual for me to look at. I didn't even know what Master Chief looked like, but we just talked about the game, and actually didn't talk about the game. We talked about the universe. We talked about the Halo universe. This is what Marty understood it to be, and what Master Chief's role in it was. And so I could get sort of a picture of what was going on here, and then who Master Chief was. He was a super soldier, and he didn't say much, but when he did, somebody usually died. And his main direction on where we launched it, from my point of view, was he said, think of Clint Eastwood when Clint Eastwood did what they used to call the spaghetti westerns for a few dollars more and a fistful of dollars, and even Dirty Harry. He said, think of that, because if you remember, in those movies, he never spoke much, hardly at all. But when he did, somebody usually died. So that was my launching point for Halo or for Master Chief. And from that, I sort of grew into, giving him his own voice.
Can you recall anything that stood out to you in the role of Master Chief?
Anything that stood out to me?
Right.
I think it was trying to find the right balance between a character who is very stoic and seems to be devoid of emotion, and yet there's something inside there that he's very emotional about. That part of it sort of comes to light a little bit in the TV show, where you get to, and if you read The Fall of Reach and some of the Halo books, you get to understand his origins. And he was basically kidnapped as a child and had a lot of things done to him that were not necessarily his idea. And so there's an emotional part of him that he has a difficult time expressing, because they kept that part of him down. So that was how every character, when an actor approaches a character, there's always, you try to find the tension in that character to convey that to the audience. And to me, that was the tension of Master Chief, is, a seemingly emotionless person who had a lot of emotion there and just didn't know how to sort of navigate it. So that's kind of how I approached it.
Okay, we have time for one more question.
You say that Master Chief doesn't say a lot.
Correct.
Do you have a line that you like that he said?
I'm sorry, say again?
You have a favorite line that he said?
You know, I people ask me that a lot, and it's hard for me to have a favorite line. I think my favorite line, I suppose, is at the end of Halo 4. There's a scene with him and Lasky on the bridge, and this is at the very end of the game, and we think Cortana is dead at that point, or he does anyway. And Lasky's, if for those of you who remember the scene, Lasky's doing all the talking and the chief is saying nothing, and then he finally, as if to himself, says, Lasky says something about being a machine. You know, we're not just machines out here. And the chief says, she said that to me once about being a machine. And I just remember doing that line, and it felt emotional, and so that's one of my favorites. But you know, the fans have theirs, and their favorite is finish the fight. That's their favorite. So, did you have you didn't get a question? Did you have a question back there? I thought I saw your.
She was keeping track of time for me.
Oh, you're keeping okay. Wrap it up.
Okay, and with that, we're at the end of questions.
Who is this? I don't know. He's glorious. I mean, he's just like you, but way better. Way better. Thank you. No, it's not a compliment. I wouldn't touch him if I were you, buddy. You don't think I should touch him. You don't mind this, do you? Because I'm your buddy, too. I think he's gonna hit you. He punches so hard, but yet his hands are so soft. Be strong. Okay, bye.
So this is our next press conference, and this is Miss Emily Neves, and she'll be ready to answer any questions. Who would like to be first this time? You want to be first again, Mr. Allen? Go ahead. Yes, we got.
Hi, my name's Alan.
Hi, Alan. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. So I know that you do script writing. So I was wondering, have you written for any anime, or are you writing more so live action type stuff?
Actually, I write, my day job, quote unquote, is I'm a senior writer for Crunchyroll. So yes, I've written a lot of anime, hundreds. Let's see, one of my more famous shows that I've written is Pop Team Epic. That's probably my favorite show I've ever written. I like to say it's the show that most aligns with my core values. So that, Copcraft, let's see what else. I've written a couple episodes of My Hero Academia. I stepped in for episodes 107 and 108, so that's the Shigaraki arc, the Shigaraki backstory, and then also the backstory of Aizawa and Present Mike and their friend from school, and the unfortunate story of what became of him. So that's probably some of my proudest work. I love My Hero, I'm kind of obsessed with it, and that arc in particular is just so juicy and so dark. So I've written hundreds of anime, and I'm actually, I'm an author as well. I'm working on a memoir right now. I'm about 38,000 words in, so a little over halfway, maybe just about halfway, but yeah. You want to go next, Mr. Q?
How does watching anime impact your life?
Oh, gosh, so much. I got into voice acting because I had watched anime as a teenager. Akira, Vampire Hunter D, all of the big ones. And then in college, I saw the Ghibli movies, and they just changed my life. And then I actually got to voice a Ghibli movie called Grave of the Fireflies. It's so upsetting, so very sad, but that's actually one of the youngest characters I've ever played, Setsuko. She's like 2, I think, when the movie starts. I mean, and then for the last 15 years, it's been a huge part of my life, so I love it. It's changed my life for the better.
So, considering the fact that you've both been a writer and a voice actor, and you're able to really kind of see the industry on multiple different fronts,
yes.
How has that impacted, or how has that influenced your work when you're writing and you're listening, kind of imagining the characters in your head, or you're looking at character arcs and everything else,
Yeah.
or how has voice acting been like, you know what, as I'm writing something, I can see how it's visualizing differently?
Yeah. Well, I know that being a writer has made me a better voice actor. And also I've directed several shows as well. Maid Sama, Watamote, Death March to the Parallel World Rhapsody. So all of those positions sort of inform each other. Because I've been a voice actor and a director, I think it makes me a better writer because I act the lines as I'm writing them. I don't just kind of say them, so it helps them fit better. And just, I come from theater too, so that gives me a really good sense of character voice, and I can, take the translation and kind of see through the way it's translated and also through the animation how I think that the character would speak, what vernacular they would use, what slang they would use, would they be very formal, would they be very informal, how fast do they talk, how slow do they talk. So yeah, all of those jobs sort of talk to each other, and they're all very similar, but I have to say, of all three of them, I think that writing is my favorite. I love voice acting, but writing, you can kind of shape the adaptation of the entire show. So it's a very important job, and it's a very difficult job, but I think it's also the most rewarding job. Just seeing, when it's all said and done, like your words preserved, basically. And also it's like doing puzzles, that's when people ask me what I do, I'm like, well, I do dialogue puzzles for a living. So, because as you know, the shows are animated in Japan, so all of the mouth movements are set. So we get a literal translation, and I have to make it sound like people or dragons or, demigods talking, but I also have to make it fit in the mouth movements. So that's often very challenging because the syntax of Japanese is so different than the syntax of English. And so there are some things in Japanese that take 3 syllables to say and they take 12 to say in English, or vice versa. So it's really fun. It's hard, but I've been doing it for a long time. So I kind of have gotten to the place where it's fun. I really enjoy it.
So as a guaranteed triple threat in the field, as a writer, director, and voice actress, what advice would you give to anyone looking to break into the field? Either one of the fields, but because you have such a very unique perspective, challenges they might overcome, how they can work on their craft, especially since a lot of people actually kind of transfer into voice acting. Yeah. They're professors, teachers, engineers, and they're like, well, I'll give voice acting a try. And then, like, we just spoke with Greg Baldwin earlier, and he was telling us that, he was 46 when he really first started to, like, get his roles.
Oh, that's amazing.
Right, and he's like, don't ever give up, doing everything else, but it's still a unique pathway for each and every person.
Definitely. There's no one right way. A lot of us get into it through theater. That's how I got into it. Like I said, I watched those shows when I was younger, and then I was a resident acting company member at a theater in Houston, Texas called the Alley Theater. So I got my degree in acting and all of that, and then I was doing theater like a full-time job, 5-6 shows a year, sometimes rehearsing one during the day, performing in another one at night. But I think that, and so one of my friends who was also in the theater worked at ADV, which is now Sentai, and he said that they were looking for new female talent and would I like to audition, and so I did, and that's kind of how it all began. But I do think that if you want to be an actor, a voice actor, you have to remember that you are an actor first, and so it helps to train in scene study, text analysis, and also practice things like improv and also cold reading, because when we go into the booth, I'm sort of an exception because I've written some shows that I've started, like Kakurio Bed and Breakfast for Spirits. I wrote that and I was the lead. So I knew what was going to happen before I went in, but most of the time you don't. Sometimes the show will air subbed before it airs dubbed, and then that's an advantage because you can watch it before you go in. But my point is, a lot of the time you go in and you see the scene and then you record it, and it's all for the first time. So you need to be able to very quickly watch the scene, read the text, understand what the character's going for or what they're experiencing, what their motivation is, what's happening to them in the scene, and kind of do all of that in an instant, and then be able to convey that with your voice alone, just in a matter of like 30 seconds. So it takes practice, it's hard. It's a lot like, I don't know, sometimes I like to compare it to playing like Guitar Hero or Rock Band. You know, you have to, there's so many moving parts and you have to like read the line, watch the script, watch the anime, and just kind of like, you know, throw it all together in an instant. So I think that training as an actor is really important. But if you want to get into writing, same thing, take some writing classes. There are all kinds of workshops online, especially one of the silver linings of COVID is that there are a lot of writing schools that are completely online. And so it's all through Zoom. You can just work on your craft, work on dialogue. I think that writing believable dialogue is probably the most important skill an ADR scriptwriter needs. And I got my minor in college in playwriting and screenwriting, so that was like my main focus. So it lends itself really well to that job. And then same thing as a director, I would say train as an actor, and then they have like directing classes too, sometimes at community colleges and whatnot, colleges. And that, being a director, the most important skill is understanding story, understanding what's happening beat to beat, and understanding like what happened to cause this moment to happen, and because this moment happens, what happens next, and what is the sort of like domino effect of the story, like what events cause what events and why, and what each character is feeling, so that you can guide an actor very quickly from coming into the booth, having no knowledge of the show, and just being able to show up in the moment and perform and give the show what it needs. So.
Oh yeah. So I was gonna ask about directing. So like, you as a director, like, are you very hands-on with your actors in terms of like giving notes and guidance on how to deliver the scene?
Yeah, it depends. I think that the most important job of a director is casting.
Okay.
So I try to first cast actors that I trust and that are professional and that I know can come in and get the job done. But I also like working with new people too. So if I'm working with someone that I've worked with a lot and who has a ton of experience, like Monica Rial or Chris Sabat, I've directed both of them, and they're just amazing. It's like, at that point I'm like, well, all I have to do is scroll, because you know what you're doing. I just scroll in the script and you go, and it's perfect. And you know, sometimes we'll have to rewrite on the fly, and Monica's a long time dub ADR writer, so she can just throw things out in the moment sometimes if a line doesn't fit. But with newer people, yeah, I am pretty hands-on. I'm very gentle though. I think that the main thing for a director is to create a safe, fun environment. It's like, guys, we're making cartoons here. And so while it is important to do the source material justice and to tell the story, and I do hold that sacred, at the same time, it's fun. It should be fun. So I'm never harsh on actors. I never yell at actors. I'm never mean, because I, as an actor, have experienced those things, both in theater, well, no, just in theater. Never in anime, luckily, but I know how it feels. And so I try to be compassionate and put myself in the actor's shoes and be like, okay, if this were me and I were having a hard time with the scene, how would I want somebody to talk to me to help me get it right? So, yeah.
Because of your versatility, what would you say is like your personal favorite challenge or new breakthrough that you've experienced?
Well, I think playing Eri was a bit of a challenge. It had been a long time since I'd played a character that young who has to go through such trauma. And so I had to play a 6-year-old girl, but not in an anime sort of cartoony way, but a very realistic way, and portray a child that young going through such intense emotion and like crying and all of these things. So it took a lot. It was a big challenge having to like put myself in her shoes and say the line as a real 6-year-old, and not make it sound corny or cheesy. And Colleen really helped me a lot with that. But I cut my teeth on Setsuko, but it had been like 10 years. So yeah, I'm much older than Eri, so putting myself back in those little tiny shoes was challenging, but oh so rewarding. I mean, like every time she comes on, the crying part wasn't hard. Every time she comes on screen, I tear up. Even when she's happy, I'm like, I love her so much. So, yeah, I would say that. And then on the complete opposite end of that spectrum, playing Uryu Minine in The Future Diary, that's probably my favorite role ever. Mostly because of the character arc that she takes. She starts out as a terrorist and then goes through all of this pain and suffering, and she's just this war-torn, traumatized, basically wounded child in an adult's body. And so getting to find her humanity through all of that trauma and suffering was difficult vocally and emotionally, but at the end of the day, that's kind of what, as actors, we live for, is like playing a character who changes so much. So
Thank you.
thank
Do you have one more question? We want time for one more, Rev? Mr. Q, do you have one more?
Yes. All right, so you said you're a big anime fan.
Uh-huh.
So what's your big three?
Oh, my big three anime? Well, definitely My Hero. I love that show so much. It has so much heart and humor. And it sparks the imagination so much. So let's see. A couple of mine are actually pretty obscure, and I think maybe I might be a little bit biased because I worked on them, but Copcraft, that's one of my favorites of all time. I wrote that, and it's kind of like a buddy cop story set in sort of a futuristic fantasy world, sort of. It's a lot like LA, but it's just like slightly on the fantasy side, but it's hilarious. And I just love cop stories, so that, and then Cop Team Epic. I mean, I'm obsessed with that show. It's so funny and so bizarre, and I can't say the S word, but it's an S post. It's like the whole show is just a big S post. So I love that, and I loved kind of the different actors playing Pipami and Popoko every episode. That was super cool. But yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Miss Emily. Do you have a moment?
So many stories left to tell, even if we have to ourselves. Can't keep history on the shelf. If they won't tell it, we will.
If this the land of the free, it was a freedom then, when they annexed Hawaii and called it Cedar Lands, without any type of payment and no signing off. Called themselves the Republic in 1894. 1.2 million acres overtaken from the native Hawaiians. When they resisted, the West retaliated in violence and erasure. The Hawaiian language is banned as part of colonialism's plan to expand, yeah.
Stuck between a rock and a hard place. Multiple bombings of Kaho'olawe as a part of their ongoing war with Asia. Used it as a place for target practice. No consent or compensation. Colonizers call for annexation. No work out for all the locals. School will never let you know. So many stories left to tell, even if we have to ourselves. Can't keep history on the shelf. If we won't tell it, we will. Too many stories left to tell, even if we have to ourselves. Can't keep history on the shelf. If we won't tell it, we will. We will.
So if you put Hawaii into perspective, well, Black and Asian history is interconnected. Considering the fight with the Pacific, then of course, versus Asia, they was treated as a middleman for war, but didn't let the Western colorism run its course, cause dark skin was a sign of dignity to core. The land was taken in the name of capitalism, when prior to it was an actual kingdom. Clap back at the system.
Stuck between a rock and a hard place. Multiple bombings of Kaho'olawe as a part of their ongoing war with Asia. Used it as a place for target practice. No consent or compensation. Colonizers call for annexation. No work out for all the locals. School will never let you know. So many stories left to tell, even if we have to ourselves. Can't keep history on the shelf. If we won't tell it, we will. Too many stories left to tell, even if we have to ourselves. Can't keep history on the shelf. If we won't tell it, we will. So many stories left to tell, even if we have to ourselves. Can't keep history on the shelf. If we won't tell it, we will. Too many stories left to tell, even if we have to ourselves. Can't keep history on the shelf. If we won't tell it, we will. We will.